Hey everybody, we've got a real short video today on panel data, and before you can start to use all the fancy Stata estimation commands, your fixed effects, your random effects, etc., you've got to have your data organized the way that Stata wants to read it. In other words, we're going to look at how to use the reshape command in Stata to turn your data into from a wide format into a long format. So we've got an example of it over here. And what often happens is you go and get your panel data. So say you have observations across countries and over time, and it might come to you in this so-called wide format. So we might have our identifier, our entity identifier I, so this would be country 1, and then our variable, call it A, is going to show up period by period, right, as different columns. So this column here, A1, is going to be our variable, say GDP, in year 1 in our sample for country 1 and country 2, etc. Right? So every column is going to be a specific time period. And then likewise, so we have another variable, population, period 1, country by country, down the column, period 2, the next column over, country by country. And again, that's not an uncommon way to see data formatted and presented, but it's not how we're going to use it in estimation. So we want to turn that from the wide format to the so-called long format in Stata. And of course, you can do this with a never-ending sequence of copy and paste commands in Excel, but why not do it the easy way? So what we want to see is one column for the entity identifier, call it I, a second column for the time period identifier, call it J, and each row is going to be a unique combination of time and entity. Right? And then each variable, say GDP, will have only a single column that varies both by country and by time. Okay? So for the purposes of our little example in Stata here, and we can maximize our Stata window here, we're going to call up some example data from the World Bank using a really handy module, WB Open Data, and there'll be a whole nother video on that, so just for the purposes of getting us some example data. So we're going to use this command WB Open Data, and we're going to call up the indicator here, sp.pop.totl, which happens to be total population by country by year. So since I'm not specifying a given country or a region, this command is going to bring up population every year since 1960 for every country and every region that's available. Right? So with the push of a button, we've got a really nice data set. And just looking at the list of variables up here, we have a column here for year 1960, year 1961, etc. And each one of these, right, is going to be population for every country in that specified year. So if we bring up our data browser, that's going to be exactly what we see, right? So scrolling over here, we have year 1960, population for country 1, country 2, country 3, etc. Right? So all the data is there. So here's our countries and our regions, country code, etc. But it's not in the format that we need. Right? Thus the reshape command. So what we're going to need to do is specify, first off, within that reshape command, which direction do we want to go? We want to go from wide format to long. So we go reshape long, and then here's the tricky part, is that the variable that we're going to create is going to be based on these year by year outcomes. Right? And so what you might see is, it would have been a little bit easier, right, if this had been labeled, say, population 1960, population 1961. So the prefix is going to be what we're going to create. So here it's going to be a new variable called YR that's going to be separated by year. Right? So that's going to be the new variable that we create. And then this subsequent command here, the I country code, right, Well, that's going to be how we identify each observation. Right? So that's going to be the I identifier. And then the J variable, right, is going to be by year, okay, which is typically how we would have it in panel data. Right? So hitting enter, we see that working its way through, and we see the composition, the actual variables in our data set have been changed. Right? And instead of all of those different columns, year 1960, 61, 1962, it's all been collapsed into this one variable, YR. So let's browse here again, and this is exactly what we want to see in that long format. So we have our country 1 here, alphabetically, Aruba, and then scrolling over, we have population in 1960, 1961, 1962, etc. So we've got our year variable here, which was the last 4 digits of each of those columns. So what we might want to do just to finish it off, so we know what this is, right? We know this was population, to just rename that variable, YR, call it population, and now you're good to go. So this works a little bit differently if you have multiple variables, and obviously it changes depending on how those columns are identified, but this general framework will get you where you need to go. And as always, further documentation in Stata, just type in help, reshape, and you should be good to go. So if you have any questions, put them down in the comments, and I will see you next time. Thank you.